Unity, collaboration, and crisis. These are some of the issues that was discussed this year at the World Economic Forum 2023, also known as the Davos Conference, where world leaders come together every year to discuss where we can solve problems and make our world a better place, and where we can find opportunity for both developing nations and those in the West. Here on this Claville Report synopsis, we'll look at the 5 takeaways from this year's Davos conference and where we as a society and the world will go in the future. Hi, I'm E.W. Claville, and this is the Claville Report synopsis. Today we'll talk about what took place during this year's World Economic Forum 2023, also known as Davos. I'm enamored by the World Economic Forum itself, because those of you who have listened to this report before, you know that I cover this every year. And this is the idea that the power of a professor, the power of the world coming together under one idea. And that's how the World Economic Forum came about. For those of you that want to look at the history and study it, it was the idea of a professor that said, listen, I believe that we as a world can come together to help solve the world problems because of the interconnectedness of the world. Now, this was way before we started talking about this on a major scale. But because he saw this opportunity years ago, we have what we have today, where the world comes together every year in Davos to talk about opportunity, crises, and solutions. So what are the 5 takeaways from this year's Davos conference? According to the World Economic Forum, .org, that's weforum.org, it states that the 5 takeaways from this year's 2023 World Economic Forum centered around trade, tech, tackling the climate crisis were just some of the topics under discussion this year. Also, leaders heard from global leaders on Ukraine, the economy, and health. And they also talked about the future and what opportunities and threats we have from cybersecurity. But let me start first with a word from Antonio Guterres that spoke about a call for unity and collaboration. He said there's no perfect solution in a perfect storm. And right now, the perfect storm that we have in the world, where we look at the crisis happening in Russia and Ukraine, is an opportunity for the world to jump in and make a difference. When we take a look at the crisis in Ukraine and really the atrocities that are happening at the hands of Russia, we have to ask ourselves as a humanity, where do we go from here and how do we intervene? And do we really want this to be a part of our legacy? Now, keep in mind, this is no different from any other world war that we've been in, whether it be World War I, World War II, or even the Vietnam War. And then for the United States, as we talk about Afghanistan, the longest war in the history of our country, 20 years where we fought there and recently just pulled out. This is an opportunity, again, for the world to come together to say, listen, humanity has to trump any type of selfish gains. Humanity has to trump any type of lies and atrocities that are being committed against people that are basically innocent. This is the opportunity for the world to come together to say no more war, but talks, peace, and an opportunity to work together to be one. So the need to go beyond Ukraine, the need to go beyond the walls of Indo-Europe, the need to go beyond these types of issues of dictators is now. Humanity has to trump anything. So when we move past the call for unity and crisis, there was a discussion around trade resilience, growth, and climate action. Let's talk about trade resilience and growth. Now, we all know that according to the World Economic Forum, global interlinked crises require global interlinked solutions. Now, for the last several years, we are coming out of, actually, we were in a pandemic where the global supply chain stopped. Never saw this in the history of our world once we became interconnected the way that we are. So I want you to think about that. Even now, when you take a look at how houses are built, if you take a look at the price of eggs now today, we never would have thought in a million years that the fact that in order to build a home on your own property here in the United States, you needed to wait for windows to come from another country in order to finish the framing up of your home to put everything else in. Who would ever thought that that would have stopped? That would have stopped the building of your dream home, the American dream. But it did. And we see ourselves in that situation today. But now as we come out of this global crisis, this pandemic, as we move forward into a more resilient and robust trade around the world, we have an opportunity now to ask ourselves, what are some of the opportunities to do better? What are some of the opportunities that we see that we can utilize from this pandemic in order to make our trade, global trade, more resilient against pandemics such as this? And also war. Going back to the first issue, the call for unity and collaboration against Ukraine, where you also see where the global supply of oil, it was also impacted, and energy across the board, natural gas to parts of Europe. How do we make sure that we employ protectionism as against unilateralism and work together for a more robust, a more resilient, and a more efficient global infrastructure and trade? When we talk about global infrastructure and trade, we also look at the global economic outlook. Once again, as trade being so closely interconnected to the economics of the world, we understand now as a world just how fragmented our trade supply can be in the event that we don't get it right. We understand that the slightest thing, the slightest movement of one area of trade, one port, can stop an entire country from moving forward and growing economically. Now, fortunately, in the West, and more specifically here in the United States of America, we are fortunate that we are the reserve currency of the world, and the economic engine of us being the number one and largest population of economic growth. We're fortunate to have that. But other countries are not as fortunate. Other countries were not able to really buffet against the pandemic and had to take some major hits to their economy. But here in the United States, we were able to buffet against the downturns of the pandemic. For those of you who invest in the stock market or have your retirement invested, which is pretty much 95% of all retirements, you saw that your retirement portfolio grew. You saw during the pandemic, things increase financially as far as economic outgrowth goes. However, on the ground, even here in our country and across other countries, we see where we had issues with the economy growing because it had to retract. Because normally how we would do business, you couldn't do business that way. Normally how you would be able to make money, you couldn't make money that way. So the economy retract. But in America and across the world, people are resilient. We thought of other ways to make money. Technology played a major factor in that. But technology alone can't do it. Again, we have to be able to merge these ideas from technology, from across the globe, into tangible ways to move goods and services and to provide these services to people in order to make money and grow our economy. This was the third challenge that Davos world leaders discuss. Also, when we talk about crises and call for unity and opportunity, collaboration, ensuring that we tackle the trade issues that we have to ensure that it's more resilient, and also ensuring that our global outlook is one on the positive trajectory as opposed to a negative. Part of that discussion has to be centered around tackling the climate crisis. Several years ago, I talked about this on one of the reports where we looked at what I call climate refugees. Climate crisis, which perpetuated by the Industrial Revolution of our world, has now caused many people to flee their origin of birth, their countries, to safer spaces because how the world's climate is impacting their countries, their livelihood. Case in point, sea rise. Sea level rise is causing some countries to disappear. Islands are disappearing because the polar ice caps are melting and they're getting ready to overtake those poor and developing nations. Because of the climate change, normally it's normally where you have rainy seasons. Those seasons of rain are unpredictable. Where normally the water would run off, the snow caps would collect snow. And during the summertime, spring, it would melt and feed the streams and the creeks and the rivers and the lakes. For some areas, there are no snow caps. Normally where there would be some type of protection from the scorching sun. Now we find ourselves with the patterns of the climate changing and we're not having that. These are all issues that we're facing with climate change. These are very important issues that we know that we have to tackle, and the world understands it. The West understands it, and we as a society understand it as well. But we have to be honest about the issues, about the causes of climate crisis change to avert a major climate crisis. And this is where unity and collaboration comes in. Finally, technology. Technology is great. I'm able to provide these analyses because of technology. People across the world can hear what I have to say and interact on what I say. And not just me, but many, many others. But technology within itself is great because it helps us to predict certain things. It helps us to provide analysis on certain issues. But it also is a way for us to live in a more unified and collaborative society. But there is a flip side to that coin, and that's the security of our technology. Is our technology secure? As a matter of fact, according to the World Economic Forum, it says, as the global security outlook made clear, there are risks. According to the report, only 4% of experts worldwide are confident that connected devices are properly secure. According to Jürgen Stock, the Secretary General of the International Criminal Police Organization, also known as Interpol, he said that this is a global threat and it calls for a global response and enhanced and coordinated action. The role of innovation from household names in areas like the metaverse, also from those just starting out, also echoed this again and again. Larry Summers told the World Economic Outlook, I've never been so impressed by the potential of technology, but he also added that it needs the right political and financial foundations. Christina Georgieva also added a strong message where she stated that optimism depends on the people in this room. I think that sums up the World Economic Forum and sums up the ability to make change and to avert crises and to capture opportunity. Optimism depends upon the people in that room. As always, I encourage you to engage with your leaders in your community on the local, state, federal, and the world level, because ultimately, as a citizen of the world, You matter. Your voice matters, and they want to hear from you. This has been E.W. Claville at the latest Claville Report Synopsis, Davos 2023.